Okay, good evening, everyone. I hope you're well. It's Rabbi Akiva Males. Today is Thursday evening. It is the 8th of July, and we're getting ready for Shabbos. Shabbos is ahead of us, which is also Rosh Chodesh of Menachem Av, and that's going to begin the 9 days. And even though we've gone through this period of time, the 9 days which lead up to Tisha B'Av, we've gone through this many times. Nonetheless, since a year's gone by since the last time, and because we all hoped that last year would have been the last time that we would have been commemorating this sad time of the year, and by now we would be back together in Yerushalayim with the rebuilt Beis HaMikdash. Many of us may have forgotten some of the details about how to commemorate the coming period of time. So that's what we're going to quickly review tonight. So again, Rosh Chodesh Av is this Shabbos. There's no forms of mourning that take place on Shabbos. So therefore, this is really what we're about to talk about is going to start kicking in Matzei Shabbos. It's going to begin Saturday night when the Shabbos ends. So let's just talk about this. Let's begin with the Mishnah in Tanis. The reason why we are gearing up for the 9 days, that is the 9 days of Av, which culminates with Tisha B'Av, is because it's a very sad point in the national Jewish calendar. And the Mishnah in Tanis tells us that there were 5 national tragedies which compelled a tanis, a public fast to be held on the 9th of Av. So the Mishnah says, "B'Tisha B'Av on the 9th of Av, nigzar al avosenu shlo yichnesu la'aretz." Our forefathers received a decree after the sin of the spies, the Meraglim, that they would not go into the land of Israel. That entire generation of men would perish in the wilderness, and only the next generation would go in. Now remember, that did not apply to the women. The women of Klal Yisrael certainly wanted to enter into the land of Israel, and therefore that gezerah was not on them. The second and third tragedy which occurred on Tisha B'Av is that the first and second Beis HaMikdash temples in Yerushalayim were destroyed. V'nilka de Beitar, disaster number 4, was that this was when the major metropolis of Beitar, which was a city that was teeming with Jews, was captured and destroyed by the Romans, and tens of thousands of Jews were murdered. V'nechra Sha'ir, and also Yerushalayim was also plowed under. Not only was the Beis HaMikdash destroyed, but after the Bar Kokhba revolt, just as a way for the Romans to make it clear who was in charge and that they did not, that Bnei Israel should never anticipate being able to rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, they went and plowed over the city, totally uprooting the foundations of the Beis HaMikdash and everything to make the destruction absolutely final. Therefore, the Mishnah concludes that not just do we fast on the 9th of Av, but when the month of Av rolls in, we minimize our simcha. And therefore, because we want to minimize our joy, there are numerous dinim, there are laws, minhagim, there are customs, there are so many details that go into what we do during these 9 days to minimize our expressions of joy. I've always thought, and I've seen Sfarim bring this down as well, that this is actually very useful because it would be very hard for us to go from 0 to 60. So all of a sudden jump into Tisha B'Av, and we're feeling this extreme mourning for the loss of the Beis HaMikdash. What might ease us into that, make it a transition, is if we have some time gearing up for the 9 days, gearing up for Tisha B'Av by exercising various forms of mourning in the period of time leading up to it. So we're going to talk about, practically speaking, ideas that are brought down in all of the Sfarim and the collections of minhagim, of customs, of practices, and dinim, of laws. What do we do during these 9 days to minimize our joy? So number 1, lawsuits. If possible, it would be best, since this is a time of bad mazel, bad fortune, Bnei Israel has suffered so much during this time. If it's possible, if someone has a lawsuit and they are able to postpone it till the month of Elul, that would be best. If they can't postpone it that long, but at least till after Tisha B'Av, that would also be good. Look, but that's not always in our control. So if a person can't postpone that lawsuit, then that's the best we can do. Number 2, purchasing new items which cause simcha. While until now, during the 3 weeks, we only did not purchase items which would have required a Shehechiyanu blessing, now we go beyond that. We say, I'm not going to purchase something which will bring me a sense of joy. The only allowance for this would be, the exception would be, if let's say that item is not going to be available after Tisha B'Av, it's limited quantities, or there's a terrific sale that's taking place now, I'm not required to take a monetary loss and lose out on this. Therefore, I can buy it, but I should put it away, don't make use of it until after Tisha B'Av. Next idea is building or decorating for pleasure. Let's say a person wants to do some construction. Now, this isn't talking about something that was absolutely necessary for dira, necessary for living. Rather, this is for pleasure. So let's say someone was, I don't know, I was building a guest house, a guest wing to my house. It was absolutely pleasure. Then it would be best I don't engage in that during this period of time, unless stopping the project right in the middle is going to cause more harm. There are some projects you can't stop in middle. If you stop in the middle, it's going to cause a lot of harm. It's going to negate what's been done till now. If that's the case, it can continue. But if it's something which can be put on hold, it would be best to put it on hold. Now, remember, if it's being repaired, if let's say this isn't being built for pleasure, it's something that is already in service, but now it just needs to be repaired. Someone's got a hole in the roof, a crumbling wall, that's a very different story, and that's certainly fine. In the case where it does have to take place, because I can't stop it because it'll ruin the project, it would be best if the work was done by an Eno Yehudi, by a Gentile. If not, then, look, we did the best we can. All right. What about a shul or a mikvah? Anything that's tzorchei tzibur, anything that is meant for the public, that's meant for the communal needs, that is not included in this. So, for example, we said that if I'm building, I don't know, I've got a vacation home, I shouldn't build that, shouldn't work on that construction now during the 9 days. But let's say a shul is in the middle of building a new shul, like we are. So that construction does not have to stop because that's not personal, that is communal. So therefore, that would not have to stop during the period of the 9 days. What about planting or gardening for pleasure? So the same idea, just like I'm not getting engaged in home decorating projects, which are purely for pleasure. And the same token, I'm also not going to get engaged with. I'm not going to get engaged with decorating stuff out in the yard or planting for pleasure, decorations, or wallpaper, anything that's decorative, that's not absolutely essential for living. That's something we want to put on hold until after 9 days. Again, unless it's communal. If it's tzarchei tzibur, it's something which is communal, then that would be fine. Meat and wine, once the 9 days roll in, again, this does not imply on Shabbos, but once it's Motzei Shabbos has ended, then we're not going to have meat and wine during this time. There's two reasons that are brought down. Number one is because we know that they cause simcha. They really gladden the heart. Having meat and wine really gladdens the heart. We're trying to minimize our joy during this period of time. So that's reason number one why we don't have meat and wine during this period. The second idea is that it's almost, I saw the Aruch HaShulchan brings this down, is that we're mourning the loss of the Beis Hamikdash. And since the Beis Hamikdash isn't here, we don't have the ability to bring nesachim. We don't have the ability to bring nesachim, our libations of wine. We don't have the ability to bring animals on the mizbeach. Therefore, it's inappropriate. How could I enjoy meat? How could I enjoy wine when I can't share this in the Beis Hamikdash on the mizbeach? That's another idea. When would it be permitted to have meat or wine during this period of time? So two simple answers. One would be Shabbos. These restrictions absolutely do not apply on Shabbos. So even though it's Rosh Chodesh, this Friday night begins Rosh Chodesh, nonetheless, there's no Simanei Aveos, there's no outward expressions of mourning on Shabbos. Therefore, there's no problem having meat and wine on Shabbos. Also, a Seudas mitzvah. There are certain celebratory meals that are mitzvah-related meals. If a Seudas mitzvah were to take place, let's say a pidyon haben, a bris milah, a siyum, we'll talk about a siyum soon. So something like that. If someone wanted to serve fleishiks, wanted to serve meat, if someone wanted to have wine at that would be all right as well. What about grape juice during this time? I've seen it brought down in the name of Rav Moshe Feinstein Zatzal, that grape juice is so closely related to wine. It's the same bracha of hagafen. It's under the same umbrella category, the same family, you might say. Therefore, we want to refrain from having grape juice during this time as well. What about other alcoholic beverages? So what I've seen brought down is it's okay as long as it's not a hagafen, but we want to remain mindful of the fact it would be inappropriate to get tipsy or drunk during this time. So if someone, let's say, is in the habit of, after a hard day's work, they come home and they have a beer with their dinner, there would be no problem with that. Again, don't go to excess. Don't have a second and third one, anything which might, cause a person to get a little tipsy. Because again, we want to minimize joy. What about wine at benching? So the answer is no, unless it's Shabbos or a Seudas mitzvah related meal, we would not have wine at the benching. Question comes up. This Friday night is going to be Rosh Chodesh Av begins, and many of us are going to bring in Shabbos early. So if I'm bringing in Shabbos early, are we able to have meat and wine? It's not technically sundown yet, so it's not Shabbos. Am I able to do this? This year, it's not so much of a question because you'll say, hey, on the same token, the sun hasn't gone down. It's not Rosh Chodesh. But let's say on a regular year, when let's say Rosh Chodesh would have been midweek, so then Shabbos is kind of that oasis where in the middle of the 9 days, someone could have meat and wine. Now they brought in Shabbos early. Can they have meat and wine, or do they have to wait till sunset? So the answer is absolutely they could. As once it's Shabbos, we've ushered in Shabbos. It's a new day. Who cares that the sun hasn't set yet? It's a new day. It's Shabbos, and there's no Avelos on Shabbos. Therefore, a person could have their wine. They could have their meat, even if they make an early Shabbos. And that works to the other extreme as well. Let's say someone is having a very long shalashudas. They're having a long shalashudas. There's a lot of zemiros going on. So as long as it's a regular shalashudas, we said you could have meat. It's Shabbos. You could have wine. But the sun is set. The 3 stars are out. But they're just not giving it up. They're having a really long shalashudas. They haven't benched yet. They haven't davened Marav, but they're just keeping that shalashudas going to have more and more zemiros. It's still Shabbos as far as they're concerned. They haven't said Baruch Hamav Ben Kodesh Chol. As long as it's still Shabbos, they can continue having their meat and having their wine. Okay, let's talk about Havdalah. The challenge will come up. What about Havdalah? So this week, it's already the 9 days. Shabbos has ended. We're not supposed to have wine if it's not Shabbos, if it's not a Sudas Mitzvah. What do we do about Havdalah? So the answer is as follows. Let me read to you what the Shulchan Aruch writes. The Shulchan Aruch says, Umuter lishtos yayin Havdalah birchas hamazon. So the Shulchan Aruch says it's no problem having the wine at Havdalah. On that, the Ramah of Moshe Yisrael's comments for us Ashkenazim, v'nogin lahachmir shelo lishtos yayin bebirchas hamazon lo b'Havdalah. Our minhag is, and Motzei Shabbos, we do not have wine at that Birchas Hamazon. We don't have wine at Havdalah because Shabbos is over. I shouldn't have wine. Elanostim Latinok. So what do? I have to make Havdalah. So I give it to a child who's not, let's say, yet at the age of chinuch. I'll give it to a child to drink the wine or drink the grape juice. And then he says, if there's no child around to give the wine or grape juice to, then it's nothing wrong for an adult to have the wine or grape juice at Havdalah. So again, what do we do Motzei Shabbos? If there's a kid around, we give the wine or grape juice to a kid to drink. If there's no kid around, absolutely no problem. Ramah writes, we can have it ourselves. The Aruch HaShulchan says they had a problem. What did they do in the Aruch HaShulchan's locale in East Russia? He says as follows, Vanachnu ein shosin. Our minhag here was we don't drink wine at Havdalah. So what do? Vosin Havdalah ala sheikher. We make Havdalah on beer. So instead of making a bari pri agafen in Havdalah, we say a shahakol, and you can make Havdalah on beer. I think that's what we always did. I have relatives, that's the one beer of the year that they buy. They're not beer drinkers. A brother-in-law of mine, he's not a beer drinker. The one beer of the year he buys is for Motzei Shabbos during the 9 days. All right, let's see. What about chicken? So we said that we're not supposed to have meat during the 9 days if it's not Shabbos, if it's not a Sudas Mitzvah. What about chicken? So the minhag is, no, we don't have chicken either because, again, that's under the umbrella of fleishiks, even though, again, no chicken was ever brought out of Mizbeach. So it's the other idea that, again, it makes a person happy. It's a good full meal you get from poultry, and we consider it in halach, we consider it to be fleishiks on a rabbinic level as far as the weighting and all that. So that's something we refrain from as well. What about if I had items that were cooked with meat? I had mashed potatoes that had a little bit of meat or something in it. So those mashed potatoes themselves are parev, but they were cooked with meat. So the halacha is, if there were shishim, if there was 60 times potatoes times the meat or the chicken, so then what do we say? The taste of the meat, the taste of the chicken was nullified, so it would not be a problem having that parev item that was cooked together with meat during the 9 days. Again, if I see the meat, I got to take out the meat. But let's say it was a sauce or it was a gravy got in there, whatever it was. So again, if there was 60 times it and I can't remove it, then it would be fine. What about I have perfectly parev items, but where they were cooked in a meat pot? So again, not a problem whatsoever to eat that during the 9 days. Again, Ashkenazim, we wouldn't have that together with milchiks. We wouldn't, put butter on that. But if I made my mashed potatoes in a fleishik pot that was clean, so I can eat those mashed potatoes during the 9 days. Okay, what about someone who's ill? Let's say someone was ill and their doctor told them you need more protein, you've got to have meat during the 9 days. So that person who was ill could still have meat, not a problem. If the person could have chicken, that would even be better because chicken is only meat. It's kind of a stretch to call it meat. The minhag we have about not having meat was on real beef. It was on something of that nature. So it would be better if a person could get their protein needs medically from having poultry, from having chicken. That would be best. But if, let's say, it doesn't, or he doesn't have access to it, whatever it would be, if the person was sick and the physician said, no, you need more protein, you got to have some meat, so the person could definitely have meat during this time. Let's talk about a siyum for a minute. So we said that if it was a seudas mitzvah, then it would be okay to have meat or wine during the 9 days. So what is a siyum? A siyum is if a person finishes a significant portion of Torah study. So we standardly would say that's talking about a Masechta of Gemara learning. It could be talking about a Seder, a whole order of Mishnayos, or Rav Moshe writes a Sefer of Nach, something from the Nevi'im Uksuvim that was learned together with Mefarshim, some of our classic commentaries. I heard from Rav Gedalia Dov Schwartz that if it was an emergency situation, someone really needed to make a siyum, even if they had a Masechta of Mishnayos, one Masechta of Mishnayos that they learned, if they learned it with Mefarshim, he had proofs that he wanted to rely on to say that that would be fine as well. Anyone who was invited to attend the siyum could also, because they're participating in the mitzvah, in that joy of being there for the siyum, they could eat meat as well. All right, now let's talk about washing clothes or wearing freshly laundered clothes. So these are the same dinim as someone in the shloshim, in the 30 days after losing a close loved one. So just like someone who's in shloshim, a mourner in 30 days after losing a close loved one, they're not supposed to wash their clothes. And if they have freshly laundered clothes, they're not supposed to wear them. That's what we do during the 9 days as well. So everyone, this is a bonus. This is a reminder to remind ourselves before the 9 days, before Shabbos, let's make sure to do a wash of everything that we would need during this period of time. What about if I say, okay, I'm not going to wear those freshly washed, I want to do a laundry during the 9 days for use after Tisha B'Av. So the minhag is, no, we don't do that as well. What if someone's traveling, they won't have time? There's some leeway there. So if that's relevant, ask me, I'll share with you what I have in my notes. What if someone is down to their last garment? They're down to their last garment and they want to know, can I wash this? Because I will not make it through the 9 days in order just to have. So the halacha here is if a person's down to their last garment until the week of Tisha B'Av, let's say on a regular year, let's say Tisha B'Av will be on a Tuesday, so that's called Shvua Shechalbo. Until the week of Shvua Shechalbo, they could wash that needed garment. Again, if it's freshly laundered, they're not supposed to wear freshly laundered garment. So what would they do? They would put it on the ground for a short amount of time, maybe step on it. So now it loses its status of being freshly laundered, and then they would be able to wear that. What about children's clothing? Children get their clothing soiled. And therefore, the Chachamim, when these minhagim were established, they never established these minhagim about children's clothing. Therefore, a person could wash children's clothing during the 9 days, even in the week of Tisha B'Av itself. What about washing clothes for a mitzvah? This would be talking about, let's say, a woman that she needs, let's say, her white undergarments for the days of her, while she's counting the clean days to get out of her nida status. So if she's out of the white undergarments, then she could do a laundry for those. Again, why? Because that's washing for a mitzvah. We said that a person shouldn't wear freshly laundered clothing during this time. So that would mean that a person should try on their clothes that they're going to need before Tisha B'Av. So I'm going to do tomorrow is I'm going to take out a bunch of shirts that I know I'm going to need for the week of the 9 days. And I want to try on those shirts even momentarily so it loses the status of being freshly laundered. So I'm going to take a series of shirts tomorrow and I'm going to put them on for a short amount of time. If I have a suit that was fresh from the cleaners, I don't think I have one right now, but if I had a suit that was fresh from the cleaners, I'd also just put it on for a moment. Now it loses its status of being freshly laundered. The question is, what articles of clothing is it a problem wearing if they're freshly laundered? So that would be a shirt, that would be a pair of pants, that would be a jacket. But anything which is meant to go directly on the body, like my underpants, undershirt, socks, pajamas, sweat clothes that I wear for exercising, those are not items that it's a problem being worn freshly laundered. So if my wife, Layla, if she did a laundry and let's say it was all the undershirts, I don't have to try on my undershirts before the 9 days begin. I would try on my outer shirt, meaning my regular shirt. I'll try on if it's freshly laundered. But undershirts, socks, stuff like that go directly on the body, that's not an issue at all. Again, when we said about I don't want to wear freshly laundered, how do I make something that it's not freshly laundered? Either try it on momentarily before the 9 days begin, or if I forgot to do that, so during the 9 days, if I want to wear that shirt, I would put it on the floor, I would step on it, and I don't have to, get it muddy or anything, but if I step on it, whatever it is, I've taken it out of the status of being freshly laundered. This doesn't just apply to, let's say, my clothes. This would also apply to, let's say, fresh linens. Let's say I want to change our linens during the 9 days. And they're fresh, they were freshly laundered. So the same idea. Again, no one's going to put on all their linens momentarily and lie down on them just to take them off before the 9 days. But how do I get around them being considered freshly laundered? Again, if I need to change my linen during the 9 days, I would put them on the ground for a minute, just step on them briefly, and then now they're not considered freshly laundered, you can then make the bed with it. Shabbos is another great exception here. That since on Shabbos there's no concept of Minhagim Avelos, outward signs of mourning. If let's say I have some shirts that I realize, oh my gosh, I forgot to try on my shirts before the 9 days. So again, I said during the 9 days, I could put them on the floor, step on it for a minute. Or what I could do is wait to wear them for Shabbos. I could wear one shirt Friday night. I could wear another shirt Shabbos morning. After lunch, if I lay down for a little, I could take off the shirt. And then when I come back to Mincha, I could put on another fresh shirt. So that's a way over the course of Shabbos, I could so to say, try on 3 freshly laundered shirts, remove them from their status. So now during the week, I could do that. Again, the easiest thing to do is just before the 9 days begin, just put it on for a moment and we'd be fine. What about purchasing new garments? So we said that earlier in this process from the 17th of Tammuz, when the 3 weeks began. So we said that it's only a problem purchasing new garments if it requires a shachianu. So something which is a very important article of clothing, let's say like a suit or something like that, I don't want to purchase that because that's going to necessitate a shachianu, and I don't want to recite a shachianu during this troubling time. But what if it was something that wouldn't need a shachianu? I don't know, a pair of sneakers, a pack of undershirts. So again, even though that would have been fine until Rosh Chodesh Av, until the 9 days, since we have this concept of Mishenichnas Av Mematin B'Simcha, we minimize our joy more when the month of Av begins. So even clothing that would not require a shehechiyanu, I want to refrain from purchasing during this time. When I was in yeshiva, I remember asking one of the Rabbi Naiman, an interesting question. I said, let's say a person is down, they're out, they used up all their socks, their underwear, so now they have a choice. Either they would do a laundry during the 9 days to get more socks and underwear, or go out to a store and buy new socks and underwear. Which is better to do? He said it would be better to buy new socks and underwear rather than wash them, because Chazal clearly talk about this age-old minhag not to do laundry during this time. So again, to have freshly laundered clothes and to do wash, because we have those minhagei avelos of mourning. So therefore, if someone was in that situation, they had no more underwear, their luggage got lost, whatever scenario you could imagine there, it would actually be better to go out and buy a new pack of underwear and socks rather than do a wash during the 9 days. An important distinction to remember is creating versus repairing garments. If someone was, let's say, a tailor or a seamstress, they don't want to make new items of clothing for themselves, but there's nothing wrong with repairing items that already existed. So if, let's say, I don't know, someone split their pants on the seam, so now you want to sew those up, that's not a problem. Let's say someone's cuff, someone's hemline came down. You want to repair that, that's not a problem. That's not creating a new garment, that's the problem. But repairing an existing item, that's not a problem during the 9 days. It's brought up, what about polishing shoes for Shabbos? Not a problem. What about bathing for pleasure versus bathing for function? This is very important. During this period of time, we were Mishenichnas Av Mematin B'Simcha. We want to minimize our joy. So as a result of that, one way to minimize our joy is we don't want to bathe for pleasure. So what does that mean? That means getting into a nice, hot jacuzzi, just to chill, just to relax, and it's pleasurable. But if someone is showering or someone is bathing, not for pleasure, but rather out of necessity, for need, function. I'm dirty, I sweated. We're all of us nowadays are used to showering every single day, some people more than once a day. So if someone is showering, that's not for pleasure, that's for function. So how do I make sure it's for function? So what I was told and what I've seen as farms brought down is make it a little bit less warm than normal. The shower that I take during the 9 days will be a little bit less warm than usual. That's a way of reminding myself I'm doing this for function. And I'll try to make it quicker than you, if I'm not gonna linger in there. I'm not going to take a long, hot steam shower. It's going to be purely functional. It'll be a little bit shorter than usual, a little bit less warm than usual. Lather up, get it off, and that's it. That's what I want to do. So again, during this period of time, let's have Rahmanas on our spouse. Let's have Rahmanas on our friends and neighbors at shul or at the supermarket. And let's not take the position that I'm not going to bathe, I'm not going to shower for 9 days. That wouldn't be fair to those around us. It wouldn't be fair to ourselves. So if we're going to bathe, we're going to shower, let's just keep it functional, keep it shorter than usual, keep it a little bit less warm than usual, lather up, wash it off, and leave. And that's how we know it's purely functional. That's not a problem during the 9 days. Now, this would come up about swimming. Let's say someone is swimming for pleasure. It's hot, whatever the case is, someone wants to go swimming. So again, if it's purely for pleasure, then that would be an issue. The same way that bathing for pleasure would be an issue. But if the reason they're doing it is not for pleasure, rather it was, let's say, for medical necessity. Let's say someone told, the physician told them they've got back problems, muscle problems, whatever it is. And the one exercise they could do that's going to be good for them is swimming. So that's medical necessity. That's not bathing for pleasure. So under those circumstances, that would be fine. What about bathing for a mitzvah? Meaning if a woman, let's say, has to go to the mikvah, so she's got to take her bath beforehand. So that's no problem whatsoever. As hot as necessary, that's for a mitzvah, that's no problem. What about cutting nails during this period of time? So that's not a problem. Again, what's brought down is if you would be a year where, let's say, Tisha B'Av was midweek, so then you would have a Shvua Shechalbo. You'd have where there's the actual week that Tisha B'Av falls in. There we would say, okay, cut it off. Don't do it at that point. This year we're not really going to have a Shvua Shechalbo, so it's no problem during the 9 days for someone to cut their nails. Just to conclude, again, is that this is a period of time where Klal Yisrael has suffered numerous calamities. So we're engaging in these ideas that the Mishnah says, we're minimizing our state of joy, and we're not coming up with new ways to do this. We've got plenty of ways to minimize our joy that Chazal have told us about, Minhagim have told us about. It's not our job to search out for new ones. So again, there's no one who should take their kids home from camp and tell them you're not allowed to have joy during this time. Camps run during this time. They're allowed to have joy. Kids are allowed to play ball. There's a lot of joy. How do we minimize our joy? We follow the map. We follow the guidelines that our ancestors have given us. And lastly, the Gemara tells us in Tanis, Kol HaMis'abel al Yerushalayim, Zoche v'roa b'simchasa, that anybody who mourns, properly mourns for the loss of Yerushalayim, the loss of the Beis HaMikdash, they should merit, God will see to it that they'll merit to see it rebuilt in its full state of joy. So God willing, in the week, a little bit more than a week that's ahead of us, the 9 days that are coming upon us after Rosh Chodesh, all of us will misabel al Yerushalayim. All of us will find it in us to properly mourn for the loss of Yerushalayim, the loss of the Beis HaMikdash, and in the zechus, in the merit of that, HaKadosh Baruch Hu should see to it that we should all see Yerushalayim rebuilt, and we should all see it in its full state of joy. All right, with that, we're going to end our review for this evening. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to help with that. Either you can email me, call me, whatever it may be. Happy to help in any way that I can.